Good afternoon, Dr. Randy.
Hey Ryan, good afternoon to you. How are you?
I'm good. It's our weekly podcast today, and another interesting topic from you
I
called
hope so.
couples therapy. When is the right choice? All right, let's hear all about this.
So people ask me all the time, should we go to therapy? Is the problem we're having significant enough? Do you think it'll really work? What makes it work? And so I thought, I've had enough requests. I think I'll sort of put together a little sort of synopsis and let people know what this is about. So first of all, most people come into therapy, as you would probably imagine, because there's a crisis. 50% of the time, it's infidelity. And then you've got one really guilty, angry, pulled-in partner, and one partner who's really, really, really enraged and hurt and wounded and terrified and upset. So the first thing you have to assess, of course, is how strong was the relationship before this happened? Were people together? Was this a mistake? Was this just an outlier? Or was this building over a long period of time? Or were the problems building over a long period of time? So you're looking at, has this been a slow erosion? Is the crisis we came in as a result of the erosion? Were the people sort of okay before, but then something happened? Because it can be other things besides infidelity, which I'll talk about a little bit later, that bring people in, all of a sudden it's a crisis. But when people come in, they're pretty exhausted.
Right.
They've done everything they can do on their own. They've gotten on the media, they've talked to friends and family, they may even talk to their pastors. They come in exhausted. They've generally been together a while. They're really looking for guidance, but they walk in the room and you feel like you need a transfusion of energy because they're just flat. They're tired, they're angry, they're sad, they're pulled in, they're separate from each other. So the atmosphere when they first come in is usually, unfortunately, one person, let's do this, and the other person being pulled in by his or her, by chains, or they're both just flat. So the first questions I ask them always is, each one of them, how do you experience the difficulties that are going on now? How do you experience your relationship? What part of it has been good for you? What part of it has been bad for you? How is this crisis or this bringing you in here right now? Why now? Why now? What do you see going on that for the first time you're really reaching out for help and you really need external guidance? I ask them both to just talk to me, open up, tell me where you see yourself right now, because that's important. The other is, what are your resources? Do you have family? Do you have social network? Do you have friends? Do you have financial resources to pay for therapy? Do you have the time and energy to do this process? Because this is a really important time of your life. You're at a breaking point. You're at an inflection point. You can't go backwards. You can't stay where you are. That's called an existential crisis, and you don't know where you're going. So try to get a sense of why the people are there, a feeling for what they are feeling, a feeling for what looks good, what looks bad, or whatever. If they decide to go ahead, I have to tell them, because it's ethical, look, I don't see this as going very well, or we need some more exploration. You are pretty angry and pretty pulled in. I have to let them know in the most objective and honest way I can what I see as a prognosis, much like a doctor would after an examination. You don't withhold information. You don't put them down. Oh, you can't do this, but you say, this is going to be really tough because you're not in a good place. It's my responsibility to let people know what they can expect or what it looks like they can expect. Very, 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 very bad when people go in and the therapist says, oh, we can fix anything, but you can't. But you can't. So it's the therapist's responsibility to say at the end of that first hour, this is what I see so far. This is what I see as the trajectory we're on. This is what I think we're going to need to do. Think about this. Think about if I'm the right person, if we can do this together. If you feel walking out a little more motivated than when you came in, a little more hopeful, then let me know and we'll go forward. Now, it's very, very important, and some therapists do this and some don't. I do, because I have both a clinical psych license and a marriage and family license with the permission of both partners. Sometimes I will do a single session first, just so people can sometimes open up a little bit more without the other person there, without the anger, the pain, the fear. But there's no conspiracy. We always talk to the other partner afterwards. This is what we talked about. These are the conclusions we came to. It's just sometimes easier for people when they're under a lot of stress to be able to just vent without their partner standing there ready to fight or, correct them or jump in or something like that. Gives me a little better sense of what I'm dealing with in terms of the resources of each individual person, in terms of why they're there and what they're willing to do. So if they come back and they say, good, let's try a session. Let's see what happens. Then we move to sort of a little bit deeper exploration. The first one is, of course, how was your relationship before this happened? Have you come to this inflection point before? How have you settled it? How, what do you really believe that is putting pressure on your relationship? What do we need to do to bring back life and energy to it? How are the two of you? Is there a love underneath this current crisis? Is there a desire to stay together no matter what? Or are you in therapy to figure out a way to get out gracefully? We sort of really explore that much more. Why are you here? What has brought you here? What are we going to be looking at? What are we going to be facing? That's very, very important. The crisis can not necessarily, as I said, be infidelity. What if somebody just got a medical diagnosis that they may not live long? What if a parent just had a heart attack and has to move in with them? What if one of their children is diagnosed with something horrible and they don't know how to face it? But it's a crisis of some kind that we really need to explore more deeply. So that's the first thing. The second is motivation. One partner is usually, sadly, more motivated than another. One pulls the other partner into therapy. In infidelity, you can certainly understand that, because the person who's committed the betrayal is not very happy about going to therapy, expecting to be the bad person, expecting to be torn down, expecting to be humiliated, expecting to be pressured for details or things like that. But motivation is also, you both have to be on board here. You don't have to have the same level, but you have to really want to be here. If you don't want to be here, you're going to sabotage this whole process and make it more difficult for everybody, including the therapist, but more painfully for the relationship itself. So I've got to ask this with them. And how motivated are you to do this? Sadly, the person that needs the relationship least always has the most power to make that decision. That's really sad, but it is in fact a fact. Okay, if I get them to say, yes, we are motivated, or at least motivated enough, to keep going for a little while to try to see if this goes anywhere, then I tell them, okay, I need commitment. Commitment is not the same as motivation. Commitment is when I say to these people, are you willing to stay the course? Because difficulty is going to happen. Things are going to come up. Embarrassing or humiliating, painful, unknown things are going to come up. I can't have you quit on me. If we still feel there's a hope for this relationship, you can't let one thing that we uncover, I'm done. So I need to know you're committed to this process. I will tell you every step along the way how I see it progressing, where I see it falling off, where I see that we need to do differently. I'll be right there with you, but no quitting, no quitting. You can tell me this is getting too difficult, this is getting too hard, and I'll say to you, what do you need for us to make that simpler or easier? But you can't just all of a sudden one day walk out, this is not working, and slam the door. So I need to know you're going to be in this with me and stay the course. Well, that's commitment. And interesting enough, as you can see, these are things you would like to know at the beginning of a relationship as well. Okay, the third one is very, very important. I call it a new vision. If you don't see a new path forward, your past will always define your future, because you're going to be locked in. You can only see this. You can rearrange the furniture in a room, but you can't, burn down the house and build a new house. I have to tell them, what do you want? What do you see? What have you given up on? What did you want at the beginning that you stopped looking for? Things that happen in your life, different phases of your life. What is the vision each of you have of the kind of relationship you want? And is it possible with each other? So instead of dwelling so much on the past, because the past always presents itself in the present, it's very, very obvious. I'm saying, what do you want differently from this? And who would you have to become as people? How would you have to change your behavior? What would you have to reach for? How would you have to look at things differently to create a new vision? Because now we're going to put our energy in toward building that rather than just trying to go through the rubble of the destruction. You have to have both. People can't just kind of run away from something. They have to be running to something at the same time. Okay, the next one is, working as a team. Both people have to do the work. They can do it differently and in different ways, but they can't let one person shoulder the major responsibility of trying to fix a broken relationship. It's just not fair. And not only that, but when a person feels that their partner is trying as hard as they can, doing the work, doing the exercises, doing what I ask them to do, not just going to therapy, sitting into therapy, going home and turning on the TV. When I say you need to talk to each other about this, you need to come up with what you wish you'd said instead. You can tape your sessions if you like. I only get this one precious hour. You have to work in between your sessions, and you have to work together. So if one person doesn't do the work, you don't have a team. And if you don't have a team, you don't have success. It just doesn't work. And again, they don't have to work in the same way, but they have to both really want this and put the energy and time in between sessions to give it. I don't want to start from the beginning each time. It's just too hard. No, the next one, this probably is really important. Maybe I should have said it a little earlier, but I cannot deal with a couple who is intent on blaming the other for everything that went wrong with their relationship. Personal accountability. Who am I in the world? How did I contribute to this falling apart? What could I have done differently? What's my grief work? What I wished I'd said, what I wished I'd done? What I really missed this person? They have to look at personal accountability. That doesn't mean the other person's right. It doesn't mean, but both people have to be willing to look at, who have I been? Have I been a quality relationship partner? Have I been kind? Have I listened? Have I made room for the other person? Have I allowed for differences of opinion? Have I learned to have productive conflict? Have I been somebody that my partner can talk to without being embarrassed or shut down? I want personal accountability, because if you understand deeply that quality people make quality relationships, then you got to work on yourself at the same time. You can't just come in and do this, if only he, then I would have, and only she, then I would have, and only that. But no, you have agency here. You can make decisions. You can change your own behavior, but you can't change it if you don't look at it. So personal accountability, really, really important. Okay, the next one is, and this is also important, is the role of the therapist. Couples counseling is tricky. It's a triangle. Well, if it's a floppy triangle, all three sides are not strong, it's going to be very prone to conspiracy. So both partners, and this can often happen in those individual 1 hour roles at the beginning, both people have to trust the therapist that they will stay objective, they won't take sides, they're going to really listen deeply without leaning in one direction or another, no bias, no prejudice. And if something feels that way to either partner, it has to be brought up immediately. Because if they don't both trust this therapist to form that tight triangle, it's going to fall apart. And particularly if they've had families who have been biased, friends who have been biased. They talk to people and they automatically take the other side. Or certain family members or friends are devil's advocate. Yeah, but what about him? But what about you? So when the therapist works, it's crucial that three-way trust is sacred. And as I said, if it starts to go off kilter at any point in time, that has to be the therapeutic, that has to be what you talk about first. Because if you don't keep that triangle solid, the whole thing is going to fall apart. It sabotages very quickly. Alongside of that, something I'm going to call mirroring the therapist. Very, very often, my role in a therapeutic setting with couples is as a translator. As a translator. It's almost like they're speaking different languages.
They're like a person in between.
Yeah, well, but I'm translating. So if somebody says, oh, wow, that was brutal, and that person came from a childhood where he was beaten every day, and he comes back at her and says, don't you ever call me brutal. Don't you ever. And I'm saying, hold on a minute. Let's define the word. What do you mean by brutal? She might say, well, he just says anything that's on his mind, no matter how it hurts me, it just comes out. And I said, is that the way you define brutal? He said, no. So sometimes I have to step in. I have to get them to define words. I have to get them to hear what the other person means, not what they said, or hear what the other person heard rather than what the person intended. So there's a lot of that kind of translation that goes on to help the people hear each other better, because they can't hear each other better. That's one of the reasons why they're there. So the way the therapist talks to each of the people, over time, both partners begin to sound like the therapist. They listen more deeply. They ask for definitions. They open up possibilities. That's called mirroring. Mirroring. You learn because the therapist ostensibly, hopefully, is well trained, has a good heart, knows what he or she is doing. So when they talk to an individual, they talk to them in such a way that person feels not indulged, but accepted, listened to, cared for. And what you want is for the other partner to mirror that same way of talking. And if they begin to do that, the relationships, you want to get to the point where you're obsolete, where they can talk to each other without you there in the same way that's healing. Okay, the last one would be, no, second to the last one would be collateral damage. Very often when people come into therapy, they would leave each other right away, but they both love their kids. They both love their dog or their parrot. They come from a culture where they will severely damage the elders. You know, they've put together groups of friends. They belong to the same organizations. All that collateral damage, all that will go away if they decide to separate. Now, and that doesn't have to be blackmail, but sometimes those attachments will keep the commitment and the motivation going long enough for us to build something beautiful back for the couple. So we always talk about collateral damage. Who is going to be affected by this and how? Very important. Well, the last one, of course, which will be obvious when I talk about it, is that as you are working with people and they are present and listening and opening up, oh my goodness, other stuff comes up. Childhood trauma comes up. You know, they're making changes. Maybe you don't like the person as much as an honest person. Maybe you like them more. Maybe you're more frightened now because you see that the problem was bigger than we thought. Do you have the resources? Do you have the time and the energy and the caring and the love to take this next step? Because now we have a bigger issue on hand that came as a result of quality therapy. You're going to come up with new issues that you didn't see or know at the beginning. The people may need individual therapy at that time. Maybe it's about an addictive problem, and this person's been trying so hard to help, and they're codependent. And wait a minute, this is your path. This is your path. Maybe very often a man is too close to his mother, you know, and all of a sudden he has to really look at that relationship. Is that really affected him his whole life? Is he giving in to behaviors that she should have been let loose a long time ago? In that sense, maybe a woman is too close to her female friends and has shared with them more than she's ever been willing to share with the person she loves. Has she done that her whole life? You know, has she given up personal relationships because she didn't want to give up these other relationships? So individual therapy may also all of a sudden be indicated, and we can't go forward until those are helped, those are healed, because they're bleeding into the relationship and they don't belong in the relationship. So then all of a sudden we do a reassessment. Okay, look at, we've got a bigger issue on our hands now, but we also have more hope. We're still here. Can we recommit? Can we be motivated? Do we have the resources? Are we in the game? So that would be the way I would encapsulate the reasons for couples therapy, what you should expect out of it, how it can be helpful, how maybe it cannot. Just want people to know this is what you look for. And I ask people 3 questions when you leave a session with a therapist. 1, can they really understand what's going on? Do you feel that you've been heard, that therapist has been able to encapsulate the issue to the point where you think we're in good hands? That's really, really important. The second question is, can that therapist get to the narrator behind the narration? In other words, can he really hear me, who I am, not just my story? And the third is, and I know this is going to sound terribly simple, but you know, don't go to anybody you wouldn't send someone you love to. If you will sacrifice yourself in a therapeutic situation, but you would never send someone you love to that person, you're in the wrong place. So that's the conclusion. Interesting?
And that's common for couples to experience this
Very common.
in the beginning, in the middle, and obviously later on in their relationship.
Absolutely. 100%.
Right. Great. Okay. Well, let's post this, Dr. Randy. Thank you for all this information. So interesting for the people that are especially married.
You know, I've been doing this for almost a half century, 130,000 hours, and I still feel every day of my life so privileged to be allowed into the sacred places of people. It's really remarkable.
And where can they find your information?
My website is randigunther@cox.net. Randi Gunther, one word, lowercase, Randi with an I. You can certainly see all the 265 articles I've written now for Psychology Today online on the website called relationshipsactually.org. They're sorted by subject, and it's kind of really fun. You can peruse. And you can certainly write to me at any time if you have a subject or something you'd like me to talk about. Just let me know. We can make that happen.
Great. Okay, Dr. Rani, see you next week.
Okay. Bye, Ryan.
All right, great, Dr. Randy, and we'll see you again next week.
Sounds lovely. Bye, Ryan.